All right, so one of the main responsibilities of a freight broker is to provide rates back to shippers. What happens is shippers send freight brokers a specific lane, whether that's an FTL lane, a LTL lane, or it may be a multi-pick multi-drop lane. But when they send that rate request out, they're going to wait for you to send them a price back of what you can get that load moved for. Now, that's relatively straightforward when you have something like a full truckload. And basically, if you have history on it, you'll go in and take a look at your history. Or if you don't have history, you're probably going to go to your load board to start forming the rate. Because what the load board is going to give you is the rates, the prices in that lane from the last 7 days all the way out to the last 12 months. And we're talking an average rate in those lanes, the median rate. Now, here's the deal. There are some lanes that you won't have any history on. You won't be able to go to a load board and look at the load board to get pricing history on that lane. And the reason why that is because load boards, at least the load boards that I've used, the load boards that I've browsed and checked out, none of those load boards provide these type of rates. So in today's video, I'm going to introduce you to the two lanes that I'm talking about, and I'm also going to give you a starting place of where I get started when I'm forming these two types of rates. So come on inside and let's get down to the business. The three loads that we're going to talk about today is full truckload, LTL, which is less than truckload, and multi-pick multi-drop lanes. As I told you earlier, it's pretty simple. If you need to get a full truckload price, you can go into your load board, put your pickup destination and your delivery destination, and what you're going to get is a price in that lane. It's going to come up with the prices from the last 7 days all the way out to the last 12 months. And you can go in and look at those prices, and then you can start forming your rate based off of what the system says. Now, most times you won't just use the number that you get in the system. That is just where you're going to start your forming your rate so you can come up with what you can actually move that load for as an FTL lane. That's for FTL. Now, what if a shipper sends you an LTL lane or a multi-pick multi-drop lane, which they often do? What do you do then? Because load boards don't have anywhere that I've seen yet where you can go in and put multi-pick multi-drop lanes and get prices for them. Nor do they have anywhere I can go in and put LTL lanes and get LTL pricing. So what are you going to do when the shipper sends you those type of lanes? Some of you would say, hey, Brandon, I'm just going to steer clear of LTL and multi-drop lanes. I'm not going to worry about trying to move those type of lanes. I'm going to stick to the easier FTL lane. And what I would say to you is, are you sure you want to do that? Because what happens then is you cut yourself off to a lot of that shipper's freight. And then when the shipper really starts to think about it, does he really need you if you can only move one type of freight? Are you really solving that shipper's problem? I would say no. I would say that your shipper, just like he needs FTL move, he needs LTL and multi-pick multi-drop lanes moved. So I would say, hey, don't cut yourself off to multi-pick multi-drop lanes. Don't cut yourself off from LTL lanes because they're harder, they're more difficult to move, because when you move those type of lanes, you get more recognition. And with recognition, sometimes come more freight opportunities. So of course you can make more money. So the idea, in my opinion, is not to just forget about LTL and forget about multi-pick multi-drop. The idea is to learn how to price those lanes. All right, so first up, let's take a look at the multi-pick or multi-drop lane. And this one is actually a multi-drop. It has 2 drops and 1 pick. So we're going to pick this load up in Marshville, North Carolina, and then we're going to Oklahoma City as our first stop, and then Fort Worth, Texas as our last stop. So we have 2 stops, multiple stops. So what we're going to do in pricing this type of load is we're going to first look at how many miles do we have. And when I look over here, it shows me that we have about 1,349 miles. Now, there's a couple of ways that you might want to do this. You might want to look at it and say, okay, what is the price that it's going to cost me to move from Marshville, North Carolina to Oklahoma City? And then how much will it cost me to move from Oklahoma City to Fort Worth, Texas? Or you could just say, Okay, it's a total of 1,349 miles, so I'll give a price based off of those 1,349 miles. Now, here is something else that I would look at always when I'm looking at multi-drops. How much time is it going to take? How many days will the driver be on the road? Well, with 1,349 miles, I know that he's only going to do about 500 miles per day. So it's going to take me approximately 3 days for this load. So when I'm considering price, I'm definitely going to consider the amount of time that it's going to take for that carrier to pick up and drop off and be done with that load. For example, we priced this particular load at $34.66. That's 1,349 miles. So I looked at the total mileage, I looked at the time that it was going to take me to pick up and drop off that load, 3 days, and we're also going to consider the fuel surcharge. Although we're not going to give the shipper a price to include the fuel surcharge because we're only providing a line haul rate only. The shipper is not asking for a total rate. So we're giving him a line haul rate only, and then the shipper will come back on his end and add the fuel surcharge in. So when we see the total price will include whatever the fuel surcharge is. So now let's talk about LTL Freight. Now LTL is going to be totally different in pricing depending on who is moving the load. If you're moving it with an LTL carrier who specializes in LTL Freight, you're going to get a much better price than you would get from a regular truckload driver that's trying to give you an LTL price. Let me give you an example. So we picked up this load from New Holland, Pennsylvania, going to Port Richey, Florida. That's about 1,000 miles. And at 1,000 miles, we did this load for $447. Think about that. $447 to the truck. $200 we made off the load. So in total on this load was $647. And that is 1,000 miles. As a matter of fact, about 1,021 miles if I remember correctly. And we're only paying $647. There's no way that you are going to get that type of price usually from a truckload carrier. Truckload carriers just don't give you that type of price to move a load 1,000 miles. So it is definitely a huge benefit to work with LTL carriers. Now, let's just say you don't work with LTL carriers. You don't have LTL carriers in your network. How do you get LTL freight moved? Well, it simply boils down to how much you can get the load moved for. And how do you know how much you can get it moved for? You have to take it to your network or take it to load boards and start trying to sell that load to carriers. Are you going to likely get a price that's in LTL range? Probably not. So that's why it's always good to have LTL carriers in your network. How I connect to LTL carriers was through a TMS that allows for you to have connection to those type of carriers. Now, although I mentioned that I use a TMS to access LTL carriers, I think it's important for you to know that you don't need a TMS to access LTL carriers to move LTL freight. I started moving LTL freight without a TMS that connected me to LTL carriers. I started moving LTL freight based alone off of my own network and taking those loads to a load board. Is it going to be harder to move LTL freight on load boards? Sure it is, because mostly you're dealing with truckload carriers. But can you do it? Certainly, because there are truckload carriers out there that move LTL freight and understand how LTL freight works, but they're just not plentiful. And when it comes to multi-pick, multi-drop lanes, this is not the boogeyman. These are not lanes that you should be so worried about that you shy away from them or run away from them. They are actually lanes that you should be running to show that you can solve your shipper's problem. Because the more able you are to solve your customer's problems, the better position you're going to be. So that's what I wanted to share with you today. I certainly hope this information has been helpful. If you want to learn more about the freight broker business, I'll leave a free link in the description. It's my 5-video series titled How the Load Movement Process Works. It will give you a look into the freight broker business, let you see how it works. That way you make a decision in the light instead of in the dark. And also, if you want to learn more about how to form the conversations, how to start your conversations with shippers, if you don't know what to say right now, check out this free video right here. So until the next time, I wish you the very best in your life and business. See you at the top because the bottom is much too crowded.